In this video, we're going to learn how we can switch characters in Unreal Engine. In this video, we're going to learn how to switch player control from one character to another character. So this is what we're going to do. So we can run around the scene, and on the press of a button, we can switch to another character of our choice, and on the press of the same button, we can switch back to the character. We'll also be putting some conditions where we cannot switch between characters when we are jumping or when we are running. We can only switch between characters when we are at rest. Whee! So I started off with a flying template project, and then I've imported a content pack, which is the third person blueprint feature, and I've just simply added it to the project. Another thing which I changed is by going to the project settings, and under maps and modes, I've changed the default pawn class to the third person character. It was the flying pawn before, and I've simply changed it to third person character so that my game will start with the third person character. I have also added a simple player start in the game, and if we play the game now, a third person character will be spawned, and I have a flying pawn which is the thing that we want to control, and it has functionalities on its own, but currently we can't do anything. So let's make it happen. So the first thing we need is an input, right? So we need to create an input action. In order to create an input action, we go to edit and then project settings, and then we scroll down here to where it says input. So in our case, we need to choose an action mapping. So I'll click add, and then I'll name it switch character, and I'll set it to keyboard E, and I can close this now. I'll save the project, and let's get started. Since we start the level with the third person character, and then we need to switch to that flying pawn over there, it makes sense to start with the third person character blueprint. So let's do that. So I'll go to the third person character blueprint, and what we're going to do is we need a node called Possess, and you need to turn off context sensitive for it to appear. So this is the node that we're going to use. What Possess does is just simply transfers the player control from one pawn to the other. So the target is a controller in this case, so we'll get the player controller and then switch it to target, and the in pawn node is going to be the actual character or pawn which we want to control. So in our case, it's going to be the flying pawn over there, but you may choose any pawn that can be controlled. So where do we start? So we'll start from that input action event which we made called switch character, and when it is pressed, we simply call Possess. Just beware that the context sensitive is turned off. It won't appear when it is turned on. So the Possess node is appeared, and the target is a controller, so we'll get the player controller, and the player index will be 0. This index will change if you have multiple players, for example in a split screen multiplayer project or something. And the in pawn input is going to be this flying pawn over here. So we need to get a reference to this from this. So how do you do that? If you are aware, this is an instance of this particular blueprint called the flying pawn. So what we'll do is on begin play, we'll get actor of class, and it is going to be flying pawn. So and what we'll do is we'll drag a node from here, make sure that context sensitive is turned on, and then promote it to variable. And I'm going to name this player robot. I'm going to get the player robot and set it as the pawn. So let's check if it works. I'll save the game. I will play it. When I press E, it works, and now I can control the flying pawn, and our character is still there, but when I press E again, it doesn't work because we haven't done the logic for that. So it's working. So I'll go to the flying pawn, or better, I'll copy this entire thing and then I'll paste it here. We already have a begin play here, so what we'll do is actually put a sequence node. First it will check whether an HMD is enabled, which is something that comes on its own. The reason why we're using a sequence node is because this particular set of statements comes under an if condition. So we could actually do the statement before this if condition, then we could avoid the sequence node, but I like to do things this way. So we'll get actor of class, and this time it's going to be the third person character, or it's going to be the first character of your game, and I will promote it to a variable called player character. And over here it's going to be replaced with player character. So if you play the game, I press E, I can control this, I'll press E again, then I'm back to the player. This is cool, but it's not looking that great, so you don't have any cool camera transition. And if you noticed, the player is stuck in between animations, or physics is kind of disabled until we press E again. So these are two things that we need to fix. So let's get into it. So let's start off with the camera transitions. So in order to do that, there is this node called set view target with blend, and just make sure the context sensitive is turned off. And here you can specify an actor object as a target for the camera. So what we're going to do is, before we possess this thing, we're going to do this, and the target is a player controller. So I'm going to get player controller. So it's going to be the player controller here, and the target is going to be the player robot. So for the blend time, let's say 1 second, and blend function should be ease in and out, and exponent should be greater than 0, otherwise it won't work. And I'll do the same thing over in the flying pawn. I'll copy and paste it. Instead of the player robot, we're going to switch it to the player character. So let's see. So if I press E, it still doesn't work. Why? Is because set view target with blend works, and then immediately it is calling possess. So this particular node would work on its own, but since this possess is being called exactly after the first time this node is called, it is going to immediately transfer control. So we don't want to immediately transfer control. So the easy way to fix it would be to add a delay node here. So it's going to be the same duration as of the blend time. So it makes sense to make it into a variable. We'll call it player switch blend time, and we'll use the same thing over here. And over here we'll do the same exact thing. We'll add a delay node, and we'll promote this to a variable, and I'll call this player switch blend time, and I'll use the same thing over here. Cool. So let's see if it works. So I have player. If I press E, and now the camera transition works really well. So it's not working when we set it back to the player. So let's see what's going wrong over here. So I'll just print a string. So I'll press E, and it transfers control. If I press E, it actually is getting called, and the reason why it wasn't working was because the default value of player switch blend time is 0, so I need to change it to 1. Or it would be better to set this value as get player switch blend time. So in that way it's going to be changed, so we don't have to change it everywhere else. We just need to change it on third person character. So what this is doing is simply getting this particular variable on the third person character and setting it to the same corresponding variable on the flying pawn. I'll just simply get rid of this print string, and you can see it works. So now you can play around with these values, the exponents and stuff. You know what, let's make it into a variable as well. So I'm going to promote this into a variable called player switch blend exp, I'm going to promote this to a variable as well, and over here I'm going to set the blend exp as the same as that of the character. So this is working except for when the player is jumping, you can see that the player is stuck mid-air. So let's see how we can fix that. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that the player is not falling before we do all these things. So we'll just put a branch and just get the character movement thing over here and just check if it is falling. So if it is falling, then it shouldn't do all these things. So this should be connected to false. So if it is not falling, then do these things. And if it is falling, do nothing else. Even if I press E, I cannot switch between characters. But since I'm grounded, I can actually switch between these characters. You can work around these camera collisions and stuff, but that's going to be way beyond the scope of this tutorial. So let's just clean this up. Let's select all these things and then right click, collapse the function, and I like to call this get references. So this is just neatly packed into one single thing. We'll do the same thing for the third person character. We'll just right click and then collapse the function, and it's called get references as well. So it's a lot more neater this way. I'll just select all of this and then comment it out. I'll call this character switching. I'll do the same thing here, and let's optimize this a little bit further. So as you can see, we are calling get player controller 2 times, and get player controller is actually a static function. Calling static functions take longer than normal functions. You can see that the target is actually gameplay statics, which is a static class itself. This is a public static function, which means that you can call it from any other blueprint or event graph. So we want to make sure that it's not being called too many times. So we are calling it 2 times, which is okay, but generally in an actual game we would have a lot more things, and then when it is something which is commonly used like the player controller, I think it's better to cache it into a variable over here. For that, go to the get references. We'll simply get player controller and then promote it to a variable, not a local variable, and I'll call this player controller, and then I'll just compile this and I'll do the same thing on the third person character. I'll go to get references, I'll get the player controller and then promote it to a variable back on the event graph. Instead of calling the static function, we are just going to get the player controller and then simply plug it in. I'll compile it and I'll do the same thing over here. Yeah, it's a lot more cleaner, it's a lot more smoother. We can then categorize all these things into its own category. So we can assign a category to the variables as well. These 2 float values can be put into a category called character switching. Player robot and player controller could potentially be used for other things as well. So I'm just going to keep it outside. And the same thing for the flying pawn. And I think we're done. So we have a player, and then if we press E, we can switch to the next character, and if we can go back to the player itself. So if we have multiple pawns that can be controlled, instead of creating a simple variable, we can create an array of pawns and then based on a condition get the appropriate pawn and then possess that particular pawn. I'm not going to show you how you do that. It's better to learn it on your own rather than, it's not that complicated. There are obviously going to be more bugs. So for example, if you're running and if you switch character in between running, you can see that the animations are not being updated, or the player is still walking, and once we get back it updates. So in order to fix that, what we'll do is we'll simply get the velocity of the character movement, and we'll simply get the length, or simply get vector length, and then check if it is greater than 0. So we'll need an OR node here, and yeah, so this is going to be the condition. So if it is falling or if it is moving, don't do anything. So which means if it is not falling and if it is small, not moving, do the position. So this should work. So if I move, if I press E, nothing would happen. If I stop and press E, it moves. And that's how you do it. That's how we do it. Yeah, that's how we switch characters in the Unreal Engine. So just as a recap, we use the Possess node to switch between characters. We use set view target with blend node for the camera transitions, and then we need to make sure that there is a delay in between these two nodes so that there is enough time for the transition to work. And simply we just check for the conditions so that this thing happens only when it is appropriate. We could do a similar thing in the flying pawn, but yeah, I leave it up to you. And that's how we switch characters, at least to my knowledge. I'll be honest, this is a project that I'm currently working on. I just thought I'd make a video on it, simply for fun. So if you want some videos on Unreal Engine as well, please make sure to let me know. If you have anything to share, please do comment down below so that I can pin them and then people can see it. And yeah, that's it. Take care. See you. Bye bye.